Europe reawakens, war, abandonment, and the slow birth of continental defense. Introduction: the continent that forgot how to fight. For much of the early 21st century, Europe existed in a state of strategic amnesia. The great wars had scarred its soul, were treated as closed chapters, safely archived behind institutions, treaties, and shared markets. Security was assumed, not constructed; power was inherited, not renewed. The European Union, born from the ashes of war, came to define itself as a civilizational alternative to conflict. Economic integration replaced military preparation, diplomacy replaced deterrence, defense policy, once central to statehood, became peripheral, outsourced, underfunded, and politically inconvenient. Yet history doesn't retire simply because it was ignored. The Russian invasion in February 2022 didn't merely shock Europe, it exposed it. Beneath the decades of peace rhetoric lay a fragmented defense architecture, an eroded industrial base, and a dangerous dependency on external guarantees. Almost overnight, the continent was forced to confront a question it had long avoided: who protects Europe when the world turns hostile again? At the same time, another unsettling realization had already begun to take shape years earlier. The Trump presidency in the United States demonstrated that transatlantic security was no longer an unquestioned constant. Alliances could be renegotiated, commitments could be transactional, strategic priorities could shift away from Europe towards the Indo-Pacific. Together, these developments marked the end of an era. Europe's post-Cold War innocence was gone. What followed was not a sudden transformation but a slow, contested, and deeply political reawakening. The long illusion, post-Cold War Europe and myth of perpetual peace. After 1991, Europe internalized a powerful assumption that large-scale interstate war on the continent was no longer plausible. The collapse of the Soviet Union was interpreted not as a pause, but as a conclusion. Military threats were replaced by economic ones. Armed were downsized. Defense budgets steadily declined. The worldview was reinforced by three beliefs: economic interdependence would deter aggression, international institutions would constrain rogue behavior, the United States would remain Europe's ultimate security guarantor. These beliefs allowed European states to enjoy a peace divided. Defense spending fell, often dramatically. Armed forces were restructured for expeditionary missions, peacekeeping, and crisis management, not territorial defense. The European Union itself evolved as a civilizational power, projecting influence through trade, law, and norms rather than force. Military integration was discussed occasionally but rarely pursued with seriousness. Sovereignty remained jealously guarded. The political costs of deeper defense integration were considered too high. Warnings came, they were rationalized away. Georgia in 2008 was dismissed as an anomaly. Crimea in 2014 was treated as a limited revision. Sanctions were imposed, statesmen were made. Deterrence was not restored. Europe convinced itself that escalation could always be managed and that Russia's ambitions were ultimately containable through diplomacy and economic pressure. This misreading proved catastrophic. Ukraine, the moment Europe could no longer look away. The full-scale invasion of Ukraine shattered Europe's strategic assumptions in a matter of days. This was not a frozen conflict or a limited intervention. It was industrial-scale war, artillery barrages, armored formations, missile strikes, and a mass mobilization on Europe's doorstep. The immediate response was political unity. Sanctions were coordinated, military aid flowed, rhetorics hardened, but beneath the surface profound weaknesses emerged. European states European states struggled to sustain weapons delivery, ammunition stockpiles depleted rapidly, factories lacked surge capacity, different tank models, calibers, and maintenance systems complicated logistics. What appeared unified politically was deeply fragmented operationally. For the first time in decades, Europe faced an uncomfortable truth. Its defense systems were not designed for prolonged, high-intensity conflict. Ukraine became both a cause and a mirror, a cause for Europe's strategic awakening and a mirror reflecting decades of neglect. The return of spending, rebuilding what was allowed to decay. In Europe, in response, European defense spending surged. Governments announced budget increases, once thought politically impossible. NATO's long-standing 2% GDP benchmark, previously treated as aspirational, suddenly became a minimal threshold. From 2014 to 2024, Europe's defense expenditure rose dramatically, reaching over €326 billion. Projections suggested further increase well into the next decade. For this resurgence, raised a critical question: what kind of power does money buy when spent without coordination? Defense budgets remain largely national. Procurement decisions continue to reflect domestic political priorities rather than continental strategy. Eastern European states closer to Russia, acutely aware of the threat, invested heavily. Poland emerged as a standout, committing more than 4% of GDP to defense. In contrast, southern European states lagged behind, perceiving less immediate danger. The result was an uneven security landscape, one that undermined collective deterrence even as total spending increased. PESCO and the limitations of cooperation. To address fragmentation, the European Union turned to a structural cooperation mechanism, most notably Permanent Structured Cooperation or PESCO. Established in 2027, PESCO aimed to coordinate defense investments, improve interoperability, and strengthen Europe's military capabilities. By 2025, PESCO encompassed 26 EU members and dozens of collaborative projects across land, air, maritime, and cyber, as well as training domains. It represents the most ambitious attempt at defense integration in EU history. Yet PESCO was also carefully constrained. It avoided stranding forces. It avoided centralized command. It avoided binding commitments that would infringe on national sovereignty. Participation was voluntary, enforcement was limited. In essence, PESCO reflected Europe's central dilemma: the desire for collective strength without willingness to surrender control. While useful for capability development, it fell short of creating a truly unified defensive posture. Russia's new playbook, hybrid war, and strategic ambiguity. Complicating Europe's security environment is the evolving nature of conflict itself. Russia's strategy extends far beyond conventional military force. Hybrid warfare, blending cyber operations, disinformation, sabotage, and political interference, has become a central tool. Undersea cables are disrupted, elections are influenced, public opinion is manipulated through coordinated information campaigns. These actions operate beyond the threshold of formal war, exploiting legal gray zones and political hesitations. For Europe, this poses a unique challenge. Hybrid threats demand utility, resilience, and rapid attribution, precisely the area where EU struggles the most. The response has been uneven, reflecting differences in threat perception, institutional capacity across member states, industrial weakness, the cost of fragmentation. Perhaps the most sobering revelation has been industrial. Despite rising budgets, Europe remains heavily dependent on non-European defense suppliers, particularly the United States. Between 2022 and 2023, the majority of arms procurement followed outside the continent. This dependence is not merely economic, it is strategic. A fragmented industrial base characterized by duplication, small production runs, and national protectionism has prevented Europe from achieving scale. Efforts to consolidate face political resistance as state fears losing control over national champions and strategic autonomy. Germany resists debt-financed defense initiatives. France guards its defense industry. Smaller states fear marginalization. The result is paralysis at precisely the moment unity is required. Technology and the race to catch up. Decades of underinvestment in research and development have left Europe lagging in critical domains. Missile defense, drone warfare, cyber capabilities, and electronic warfare systems all suffered from neglect. Recent, incen- Recent initiatives, particularly through the European Defence Fund, aim to close these gaps. The 2025 EDF work programs allocates over 1 billion to coordinated ED across coordinated R&D across multiple domains, seeking to reduce fragmentation and restore competitiveness. These efforts represent progress but also underscore how much ground has been lost. Trump and the strategic comfort. While Ukraine exposed Europe's military weakness, the Trump era exposed its psychological dependence. By questioning NATO's automaticity and framing security as transactional, Trump forced Europe to confront an uncomfortable reality. Alliances endure only as long as interests align. This realization did not disappear with Trump's departure. The broader US strategic pivot towards Asia, combined with domestic polarization, has made long-term American commitment to Europe less certain. For the first time since the Second World War, Europe must seriously contemplate the position of defending itself. Conclusion: a continent at a crossroad. Europe today stands between two futures. In one, it continues to spend more without integrating, cooperates without commanding, and speaks of autonomy without binding it. In this future, Europe remains wealthy but strategically subordinate, dependent on external power for its security. In the other, Europe accepts the political cost of true integration. It centralizes procurement, consolidates industry, standardizes forces, and builds a defense architecture commensurate with its economic weight. This choice is not technical, it is political, historic, and civilizational. The illusion of perpetual peace is gone, and the question is now whether Europe will rise to the burden of power or retreat beneath the comfort of rhetoric. History will watch.